Namaskar and welcome to Spiritual Care for the Future, a multi-dimensional discussion. My name is Gaurav Rastogi. I'm board member and dean at the Hindu Community Institute, and I'll be leading today's panel. This is an important topic, and to join us in this conversation, we have a fascinating and very esteemed panel that has come together, and I'm honored to lead this discussion. I'd like to introduce you to each of the panelists. First, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Kamal Abu Shamse, who's Director of Interreligious Chaplaincy program at the Graduate Theological Union, GTU, in Berkeley. I'm going to talk to Dr. Kamal about interreligious chaplaincy education. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Asha Shipman. Asha ji is Director of Hindu Life at Yale and is also the chairperson at NACA, North American Hindu Chaplain Association. She and I are going to talk about intergenerational continuity on campus. Next, I'd like to introduce you to my friend Dr. and chaplain Bruce Feldstein, who works at Stanford Medicine as chaplain, and he's past president of Neshama, the Association of Jewish Chaplains, which is a professional association with Jewish chaplains worldwide. He has been a tremendous teacher for us in the field of compassionate presence, and I'd like to ask him about embedding compassionate presence in everything we do. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Reverend Sifu Anil Singh Molaris. Sifu is Executive Director at Spiritual Directors International. He is an ordained Zen monk, a spiritual companion, and a former tech executive. We have a lot to catch up on in today's conversation. Welcome, Sifu. Our topic today is spiritual care for the future. This is an important topic in today's times, especially in today's times. We have seen an exponential increase in the need for spiritual care. Modern society has seen a rise in loneliness and strife with increasing human suffering in spirit, which needs to be ameliorated, which needs to be handled. Now, spiritual care can heal the spirit, can heal the society that we live in, and bring about a greater sense of care and togetherness. But how do we make this happen? How do we create this sort of spiritual care for the future in a world that desperately needs it? Let's see a few signs of this need for spiritual care. There is a rise in the number of people that declare them to be nuns, essentially coming out of formal organized religion and still holding on to a need for spirituality, reporting as nuns, but also joining yoga studios and engaging with other spiritual communities. We are also seeing a rise in loneliness. 61% Americans report being lonely. There is, in fact, a lot of talk about the loneliness epidemic. The question really is, how do we progress toward a more caring community? How do we build a system which takes into account the positive aspects of organized religions in order to create a self-organizing system of spiritual care? For thousands of years, people have created and belonged to and participated in organized religion in order to come together, in order for those religions to act as the glue binding the communities together. But as we start to explore non-religious traditions, non-religious identity, how do we create something new, which is a self-organizing system of spiritual care? Now, I come at it from a unique perspective of the Hindu tradition, which is the tradition I was born in. And the Hindu tradition has traditionally been very different from the way Western society is organized. The Western society, the way we see it, is organized around a Judeo-Christian framework, which is to say the temple, the church, the synagogue, the mosque are the centers of the community. But the Hindu society traditionally does not organize that way. It's far more self-organized, where different needs are being fulfilled by different parts of the community. And now we find ourselves in a world which is between these two worlds, where organized religion is somewhat less dominant right now. And we Hindus find ourselves, for example, in the diaspora, without the framework within which our society tends to function and communicate. We're going to have to work together and create something together. And that brings us to this panel, esteemed guests who are helping us in the Hindu community learn from you and helping us create something unique and interesting and truly wonderful. Now, the topic for today's conversation comes from a really hard conversation we had with the president of GTU. And at that time, we were only interested in creating volunteers to serve the community as counselors of Hindu tradition. And and the president leaned on us and he said, look, you need to think about a continuum of care between volunteers and professionals. It's not enough to just have volunteers. And so we started thinking about how we can create a scalable and self-organizing system of spiritual care, connecting to places and people that need spiritual care with with volunteers as well as professional chaplains and spiritual care providers, which belong to a knowledge and relational network of commitment and practice. This is important, but also in place a social infrastructure. The vision we have is, remember back in the day, you knew the taxi guy in your community, you had their phone number, you called them when you needed them. But now you don't have a one-to-one relationship. There is a many-to-many relationship. You just look up Uber and you call the taxi and it shows up. Can we have that sort of arrangement with spiritual care? A many-to-many relationship. And that allows us to be scalable. And that's the context for today's panel. I'm going to begin by asking Dr. Kamal, how can an interreligious approach to chaplaincy work? Dr. Kamal?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much, Gravji, and thank you to the Hindu Community Institute for putting this panel together. What's such a great question and challenging one at the same time? With every challenge, there is an opportunity, and we do have an opportunity now. Number one is the opportunity to communicate with you through this podium as Zoom, even though we would love to be in person with you. Considering that also the opportunity in this pandemic that it brought minds and hearts from all over the world together that otherwise we would not have the opportunity to do so. When we consider chaplaincy, when we consider how can we approach interreligious approach to chaplaincy is not that different from how we live our lives, how we dialogue as multi-faith communities in the 21st century. How do we live our lives as human beings in this world in the 21st century? Number one, we don't live in a vacuum. That means we are not in an enclosed society, members of the same faith, completely isolated from one another. We don't live a monastic life. We live an interfaith life every single day in every decision that we make, whether be it what you have for breakfast, what we have for lunch. We cross cultures, even for a simple matter of let's join for a meal. And during that joining, we negotiate. We are always working and living in a life that we negotiate with our laws, with our ethics, and with the environment that we are in. What dietary needs we have, we negotiate that even as we join together, members of the same group or members of interfaith groups. What foods can I eat? It goes along with how can I live an interfaith and how can I deliver interfaith chaplaincy? It comes down to one thing. This one thing is the shared humanity that when we meet together, whether it for a meal, whether it for interfaith dialogue, whether be it for providing spiritual care for a same faith environment or in a multi-faith environment, is we join to affirm our own humanity and the humanity of others. That is the simple recipe for success in any given situation. For me as a Muslim, the foundation that I have in the Quran, that God bestowed the honor and dignity on the offspring of Adam. So that honor and dignity extends to my own community, my own family, and the human race altogether. So when we join in honoring one another. This honoring of one another in a interfaith setting, whether be it dialogue, whether be it providing spiritual care, it starts with simple questions: is who is the person that I'm dealing with, and what are their needs, and how can I serve them? So the basic foundation of multi-interfaith, multi-faith chaplaincy is service to humanity. So we come together to serve people, and this service is based on a person who has the ability to provide and a person who is vulnerable. So in that sense, there is a foundation of ethics that needs to be in place. Is, first of all, not to take advantage of the pain and the suffering of the people who are there, to uplift them. In a way, when we say to bear witness, is to be with them, to respect and to be humbled by the invitation that we are in the presence and joining with a community, with a member who is in pain. And it is our responsibility to the human race, whether be it from a humanitarian or from a religious theological understanding, is to empower. So this empowerment comes in from being able to sit down with the individual, giving them time to hear with them and to help them navigate what is happening in their life and how we can utilize whatever in their lives to solve or to have them survive what's going on. So that is the first foundation of how can interfaith, multi-faith chaplaincy help people at times of need. The second one, when it comes to the needs themselves, the first and foremost threat to our human existence is extremism. Extremism that works to negate the other while elevating the self. And that happens within same faith and within multi-faith approach. You have within the same faith denomination that said we are the only path that is right and everything is doomed, and that erases the pluralism, the foundation of we are all one, yet we are all different. So we're not here about erasing differences. The late oldest daughter of the Reverend Martin Luther King, Yolanda King, said, let's talk about differences. Let's talk about differences until differences make no differences. So we talk about the differences for the sake of understanding. If I don't understand what's important to you, if I don't understand what's the differences that we have, there is no respect, there is no appreciation to the differences that we have that makes every person unique. So chaplaincy and interfaith chaplaincy, because of the vulnerability of the communities that we're dealing with, proselytization, or forcing one's own faith and dogmas and theology on the other, is the major threat to chaplaincy, that we must be united together to say, you don't push your faith on other people at times of need, including pushing an approach to prayers. When people say simply, just pray for me, easily I can pull out a prayer from the reservoir of prayers that I have from my own tradition and deliver a prayer that is authentic to me. However, if it's about serving the other, it has to first and foremost consider the needs of the other. So a simple question such as, What would you like me to pray for? How do you normally pray? Do you pray sitting, holding hands? Who do you call upon in prayers? So those simple questions, and being mindful of the opening. How do you call the divine? How do you call the importance, what is important to you, and how you end it, and what you ask, and who you ask for? All these have significance to the person who's receiving that. And also for ourselves, when we go in and with the intention of being with someone who's in need, one approach is you go in and you deliver what you have and you leave. And that basically simply does not work. It does not work because we have been witnessing people who are going to different theological springs to get empowered. A Muslim would go and be with other communities to get empowered because there is something lacking about your own faith community approach. So human beings are always looking for other sources that will empower them religiously and spiritually. At the same time, they are in constant dialogue with their own understanding of their faith because of constant challenges that we find ourselves living in. So that translates to an assessment, a process to assess the important needs of the person that you're dealing with, and trying to find sources from their own faith communities. So those are two approaches that I consider as the golden foundation for interreligious chaplaincy: is upholding humanity, looking for the shared foundation of service, of uplifting people in need, and not to take advantage of people who are in need by applying a foundation of ethics. The ethics of care is important. As a result of that, what will happen is you will inspire people, and at the same time, you will be impacted by their stories. It is the softening of the heart that we are after in interfaith. Chaplaincy is for the provider to be impacted by others, to be moved. Here is not about sympathy and to feeling sorry. It's about to be moved by their pain and suffering, to be moved by their stories of challenge, to be moved by the stories of difference, that you can deepen your own faith and also deepen understanding with people of different faiths. That is the essence of success of chaplaincy, that we have been working on it for a long time in the US, but this is also missing in many other communities on the world. So we look at this as the opportunity here to team with communities, and especially minorities, that has not been understood. And the majority of chaplains who are Christian are lacking the competency to care for people of minority faiths and religions, to say, we would like to partner with communities, that we train their own communities to care for themselves. The example of the chaplain here provides an opportunity that is different from the example of the faith leader, let's say the title of a priest or the title of an imam or a rabbi who is leading and serving the community in an institution such as a temple, a mosque, or a synagogue, or a church. In the religious institution, the faithful are coming to you, and they are coming for inspiration and sometimes being dragged into by their family members, which is, at least you have them in the building. When it comes to chaplaincy, it's a completely different field. People find themselves in the hospitals and they are looking, they're not coming for religious empowerment, they are simply drowning, overcome being overcome by their pain and their medical, if they are in a hospital setting, by what's happening in their lives, the presence of the chaplain is different than the presence of the faith leader in a congregation. Our services are for let's call them the clients who are patients or even inmates in a prison. Then we serve the people who serve them. Because in order to take care of one person, you need to take care of everyone who's caring for them as well. My training has been in healthcare. So when we look at physicians and nurses who are exposed to pain and suffering continuously, we find an obligation here to provide care and to provide relief for them, whether be it in prayer, whether be it in services, whether be it just listening. So listening to one another has also an element of respect of the privacy. All these elements, the training of a chaplain is different than the training of a faith leader. And that's why we would always look for opportunities to train and to partners with communities. Those are some of the areas where I find that interreligious approach to chaplaincy is meaningful in affirming humanity, in affirming pluralism, and in being also respectful of your own foundation or of your own boundaries as a faith leader. Not all services I can provide for people. And because of my own faith, because of my own limitation, and because of who the other is, what they're asking for. So the simple foundation of respect here for diversity is to know where your boundaries are and to stop at a time that you cannot provide, not to abandon the people, but to look for other people who can facilitate by inviting, whether be it colleagues who are from a same faith or who are able to serve, or inviting guests from outside the institution to provide. Knowing that you have not abandoned the people and remained with them, that is one way that we see that chaplaincy can function in a better way, and by looking at people, looking after the needs of people in an interfaith way.
Dr. Kamal, I'm so moved by everything you've said. I've been taking copious notes. This was wonderful, and I see the wisdom in doing a better, in fact, 45 minutes will not do justice. I think we need a longer frame for all of us to hear each other and engage in dialogue. This was wonderful. And so you talked about a sort of foundation of ethics and a foundation of respect, and it was very interesting. I'm done with the recording part, but interesting that what it takes to be a faith leader you're calling out is a very different thing in many ways from what it takes to be a chaplain, because again, they come to you in the former case. In the latter case, you're going to them when they're not here for chaplaincy services. They're trying to get rid of a problem they have. And being vulnerable, how do we engage with people in a respectful? So foundation of respect is another thing I took away in this thing. And the third thing that you talked about at the end was having that network of colleagues that you can rely on. That, look, I can only do so much, but I have colleagues that I can call upon that can perhaps help a little bit more.
And that network literally needs to have the same foundation that you have. Is I can call on you, Gaurav, to come to care for a Muslim. Sure. I cannot call on somebody else because I don't know if they have the same approach of understanding of the diversity, respect, and appreciation, and not to push their own faith onto others. Those are the two, what I see as threats to the fabric of interfaith relations is not having people who respect the diversity and pluralism, or having the common sense
Yeah.
not to push their own faith onto others.
Yeah.
I might have major differences with you theologically and how to approach things. Even we had that discussion the other day in class with a Hindu student about service. Can we just be there to serve humanity? I said, yes, that's a wonderful approach. Yet the point of service might be different. I look at it myself as I recognize that all of us have been created by the divine. I recognize that I have been given that task and opportunity and resources to care for others. And the reason I'm there is to satisfy and to please my Lord in caring for the people that God created. It is not just simply a service. It is a service wrapped in appreciation for both, for what God created and for God who given me that opportunity and honor, knowing that if it's been given to somebody else, it is my loss. So it is just beyond just feeding. It is beyond just putting a hand to comfort people. It is comforting a soul that is sacred, comforting a soul that knowing that is coming from God, and doing work that pleases God. All that gives me the inspiration to do more. So that is the race. That is the challenge that all of us have. And basically, we can use our own theologies to compete.
Yeah.
So I'm going to compete with you for goodness.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good competition to have.
That is the competition. Say we're competing for goodness. It does not have to negate you. It does not have to belittle your efforts. Say just simply, this is the ultimate is serving humanity, and we are serving God when serving humanity in that way.
Yeah. Amen to that. You and Bruce D make such a compelling case for chaplaincy that I can scarcely imagine anyone who hears this and does not want to do chaplaincy work on their own. It's a very compelling case. He said, I can see why you guys are friends, because you talked about the simple questions to ask. How may I, what would you like to pray for? 3 days ago, he said very much the same sentiment. So I can see how you're good friends.
I was on the receiving end of prayers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we are human beings. We are struck by illness. I needed surgery, and I was in a hospital. And one of my friends, who's a chaplain, came to visit with me. And at the end of the visit, he said, "Would you like a prayer?" I said, "Of course, I would love a prayer." So he delivered the most beautiful prayer. At the end, he said, "And in Jesus' name, we pray." And I looked at him, I said, "What a beautiful prayer, but you need to be mindful of the ending, because this is not the ending that I would like to hear."
It was all fine until that line.
And that's basically, it is, as they say, the devil is in the details. So a simple foundation of respect can be shattered by overcoming and by overlooking small elements such as how to pray, where to stand, should we hold hands or not. It might be an organic way for me to hold hands, but if the person in front of me, because of their faith, does not allow them to hold hand with others, I will lose that entire connection with them simply by not being able to read. So in this way, we are a magnet. We look at the differences, we respect them, we affirm them and say, you have this way, I have this way, but because in honor of your tradition, because number one, I learned that A starts with recognition. If you recognize the differences, then it comes to appreciate those differences. Once you have the recognition and the appreciation, then the second one becomes the celebration. Otherwise, this idea of a melting pot, that means I will dissolve your entire identity and uniqueness to fit with me. I said, no, you know what? I would like to have it, as one person say, the salad bowl, that each ingredient retains its own color, its own uniqueness. We have many ways of cooking dal, but I cannot say dal is one item that is transcendent and it's all the same. So no, when you have it as yellow dal or red lentils, it's completely different taste, different flavor for a different occasion. So by this, you appreciate the element and the spices that you put in and the smell that you have. That's why you say those things are important for the people who believe in them and important for those who provide them. So again, it is this the foundation of living in a multi-faith community in the 21st century.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal. Now I'd like to invite Ashaji to talk to us about intergenerational continuity on campuses. Ashaji?
Namaste. I'd like to thank Gaurav Ji and the Hindu Community Institute for inviting me to participate on this panel. I join you as the chair of the North American Hindu Chaplains Association, or NACA. NACA has partnered with HCI on their grand vision of expanding chaplaincy, or spiritual care, to our Hindu communities within institutions in the United States. Today, I will specifically comment on Hindu chaplaincy in higher education. College is a time of personal discernment and identity formation. Students are studying hard and exploring career opportunities. They're participating in non-curricular activities to develop their avocations. They're establishing friendships and hopefully exploring their spirituality. It is a very tender, joyous, exhausting, and sometimes confusing time. And the need for mentors is particularly important. We hope that their families continue to play a major role in their lives. But away from home, mentors can be professors, coaches, deans, upper-level students, and we hope, Hindu chaplains. Many people I meet wonder, what is a Hindu chaplain? And from my perspective in higher education, a Hindu chaplain is someone who's professionally trained to offer spiritual care, who has their own spiritual grounding, but whose work is not attached to religious institutions per se. Instead, it is attached to the culture of their university. The spiritual care provided by chaplains centers on the needs and desires of their individual care recipient, in this case, our student communities. Chaplaincy in the United States has roots in the military and has expanded to higher educational settings fairly recently. While chaplaincy has a strong legacy for the Abrahamic faiths, it is growing for Buddhist communities, and we hope to nurture this profession for our Hindu communities as well. NACA, as a professional organization that supports Hindu chaplains, offers our guidelines regarding how we define Hindu chaplaincy, and we also offer our own vision of the values and ethics we think Hindu chaplains should ascribe to. I want to share this with you so you can see how it interfaces with the student populations we work with. We ground our care on the framework of the Hitaisen, the unbiased friend focused on a person's holistic well-being. We instill our work with our personal commitments to ahimsa, to non-harm, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, to any care recipient, to dharma, to principles and traditions that form the core of our outlook, and to a recognition of the inherent diversity and richness of Hindu thought, practice, experience, and culture. We cultivate shravana, listening, and manana, reflection, in ourselves and our care recipients, with the goal that they gain resilience and a sense of clarity, meaning, and inner purpose. In this way, we walk alongside our care recipients. The generation that is now in middle school and college is Generation Z, the most ethnically, spiritually, and racially diverse generation in US history. Among the many data sources I rely on is Springtide Research Institute, because they focus specifically on Gen Z and their religiosity. This is what Springtide has discovered about Gen Z's religious outlook. 61% of 13 to 25-year-olds report an affiliation with a religious denomination or tradition. However, Over 50% of them report little or no trust in religious institutions. 24% of young people with no mentors feel like their life has no meaning or purpose. Just one adult relationship reduces that percentage to 6%. Now, we know that mental health across the board in the United States, including our youngsters, has been troubling in the past decade or so. There's been a significant increase of anxiety and depression, along with other mental health challenges reported by the medical field. The pandemic has exacerbated this trend, and now more than ever, we need trained professionals who can support the mental health and spiritual flourishing of our communities. Chaplains are one part of that support network. We know that Generation Z places a high importance on their relationships, and that is where Hindu chaplains can make a huge difference in the life of a college student. Springtide suggests, and I have seen firsthand, that having an influence in a young person's life requires deep listening skills, transparency in what we can and cannot do, and demonstrated integrity and expertise in what we are trying to convey. Springtide calls this relational authority, and you can see that this is closely tied to the values that NACA promotes for Hindu chaplains. Another important fact is that chaplains are less tethered to a religious institution, so students see us as more easily engageable. Why is this important? Again, from Springtide, more than 1 in 4 young people say they have one or fewer adults they feel comfortable reaching out to when they need help. Nearly 40% say they sometimes have no one to talk to and that no one knows them really well. You may be a parent, aunt, uncle, grandparent, or godparent to a Gen Z Hindu child in college, or who will be entering college soon. You may hope that this cherished child considers Hindu traditions, philosophies, and practices as integral to their present and future self. You may hope that in college they will have someone who they feel they can trust, who they can talk to when they're troubled, and who can connect them with campus resources when they need them. You may hope they will find a home away from home with a robust community of friends to counter any effects of feeling alienated or lonely. You may hope they will connect with their faith in a deeper fashion. Perhaps you hope that there will be someone who can model how to be Hindu and successfully navigate a religiously pluralistic world. That represents much of my work as a Hindu chaplain in higher education. In closing, I ask that you consider supporting the efforts of this team of organizations, hoping to develop a rich spectrum of spiritual care. Hindu chaplaincy is very new to the United States. When I began as a Hindu chaplain in 2013, there were only a handful of us in higher education. Since then, we have grown our numbers slightly, but with the formation of NACA and through partnerships with organizations like HCI, we are ramping up our efforts to spread the word about this wonderful career and support network so that Hindu chaplains can become properly trained and mentored and our Hindu communities can flourish. If you are interested in learning more about NACA and Hindu chaplaincy, if you're interested in supporting our work or joining in our efforts, please visit our website, hinduchaplains.com, and be in touch with us via our newsletter and through email, naka108@gmail.com. Thank you once again. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Ashaji. Now I'd like to turn our attention to compassionate presence. You see, this spiritual care is not all robotic. Even if our interaction might be mediated by a phone or a machine or the internet, how do we embed compassionate presence in everything we do? I'd like to ask Bruce Feldstein to talk to us about it. Bruce G.
Gaurav, thank you so much. It's a real treat and pleasure to be here with you and with everyone.
All right.
So I'm in thinking about this question of embedding compassionate presence and into a technology. I want to take us back to what do we mean by spiritual care in the first place? And then let us distinguish what do we mean by spiritual care and compassionate presence, and then look at the separately into the technology and the media of it. I like you and I were talking earlier about spiritual care was one-on-one, and we used, let's say back in the old days, we all lived together in the village, and I would know you, and I would say, oh, I lost somebody in my life. I'm sad, and you would know me, and you would come up, and there would be this. We were already connected, and in a one-on-one kind of way. But that's no longer our world. And not only that, we're in a world where you and I both live in the Bay Area. So you're coming from a Hindu tradition. I'm coming from a Jewish tradition. We're coming from across the Bay. And yet here you and I are joining. We're together. It's a different world. And yet in our common humanity, we share the same, we're living in the same concerns. We have the same concerns. So when I'm thinking about spiritual care, I'm thinking about, first of all, about care. It's about belonging. It recognizes that we belong to, with, for each other in a social structure. Now that's already kind of going against some of our common sense because it looks like we're very separate and divided. But as a chaplain, no, I come to see that who we are really is each other. I cannot not see that. I see that commonality now. So what do we mean by spiritual? I think about what I stand on behalf of when I go into the room. You know what? Let me just make this operational. Let me take you to the bedside as I'm about to enter in with someone, and maybe I could put a little external speaker and show you what it is I do. Let me try that out. What do you think? Because I think what we're doing in compassionate presence, and whether, so let me just talk my way through it. So I see this as creating a compassionate presence. It's a creation or a bringing forth of an architecture in time, a space, a quality of presence. And by architecture in time, I see, just like we enter into a building, and then we enter into a space, and then we exit out. There's also an architecture in time where we enter into a moment, an engagement, an encounter with someone. We engage with them in conversation, in being together, and then we exit out. So I've come to appreciate there's a structure for this, which I believe is true for all of these kind of encounters, or can be. And what it does is it simplifies it for me. And it makes it possible, whether I'm one-on-one with you in person or by Zoom. And then once we have this kind of understanding, we can then look at, well, what is a common structure or discourse or culture that we could create that everyone could then understand and be able to then access? Much like you said, okay, I need to get to the airport. I'm going to just call Uber. Now we understand Uber, and there's trust with that. We know how it works. But what about creating this kind of a system for spiritual care where whatever we're going to call it, people understand what it is? There's a trust in terms of a sincerity, an expectation, a kind of thing, so that no matter who you get, there's going to be this, certain standards are met. So let me go back to the an encounter. In architecture and time. I'm about to meet with you. Let's say I get a call. Can you come and see Mr. Gorav? And I say, sure. So I'm going to approach, and before the encounter, I want to prepare myself for it. I'm going to move from an everyday way of thinking. I'm busy, I'm preoccupied, I've got this, that, and the other to do. And what I'm going to do now is I'm shifting my attention and my intention toward a sacred encounter. Can I ensure that it's sacred? No. But can I set up conditions out of which a quality experience of sacred can happen? Absolutely. So I prepare my attention and my intention. I have some particular practices. You know, we've shared that in our school together with the students of breath, of bringing my focus into my body. As you know, at the hospital, we gel in and we gel out. We have to sanitize. And so as I do, I take I imagine the gel evaporating away my preoccupations. It brings my attention to my body, to here, to now. I lift up my hands as I go in. May I be of service, I remind myself. So I've prepared my attention, my awareness, my focus. Here, now, I've let go of my preoccupations. So what is my intention as I enter into the room, or as I enter into the conversation, or as I'm about to see your face and encounter you? What is my intention? Now it's going to take longer for me to say these words because I now can do it with a single breath, in the time of a single breath. But it goes something like this. As I enter in to be with you, may I, this being, quality, presence, body, may I join with you in your world as it is for you. And here's the operative verb, and accompany you from there. And may I join with you and accompany you in a way that allows you to connect with your source of strength or comfort or meaning, however, whatever that is for you. And that includes the particular, let's call it the breakdown, the interruption, a suffering, a pain, a something that's incomplete. May I bring a quality of presence that allows you to connect with your source of comfort, strength, meaning, or what's interrupted, and journey with you, accompany you from there. May I listen for, and here's my definition of compassion. May I listen for what matters most for you in this moment and accompany you from there. Whatever time I have, may I be fully present with you. And now that we've joined together with this kind of intention, or with this intention, now I come into the room and I say, hello, Mr. Gorav, my name is Bruce. And so now we actually enter into this joining, having set this up. And in the process, you know, we talk back and forth. You know, I might say, what prompts you to call today? I'm listening, I'm listening for the what's missing, the why, the story, the chief concern, the what matters most. And once I listen to that, and it's taking place in the listening. I can't emphasize this part of it enough. This is crucial. It's taking place in the listening. Listening isn't just the hearing, but the listening is the way I hear and hold and interpret what you say, both in a cognitive, intellectual way, but also it's taking place in mood. Very much in mood and emotion in that dimension at the same time. And then we talk back and forth. This is the part called conversation. And I love this word conversation. And I want to take it back to the Latin con, which means together, and vers, that root letter. I believe it's from the Latin word versare, but it means to turn or to change. And so as you and I are coming together, both verbally and non-verbally, together we change. There's a joining, a togetherness. And we go back and forth, and at different levels, we might talk about social things. We might get down to matters of, you know, what really matters, of meaning, of purpose, of hope, of love, these dimensions, and it could be also the negative aspects of it, the suffering aspects, as well as the positive. And then for me, in the context of this spiritual encounter, I may be called to offer a teaching that may be of service to you. So I might bring forth an aspect as teacher. I might bring forth an aspect of guide and say, you know, what I see for you is, you might consider. I might bring forth an aspect of ritual, where I'm going to create a space that we can enter into and reveal something. You know, ritual is about revealing the unseen. I may offer a blessing. In fact, in Jewish tradition, no encounter is complete without a prayer, is what Maimonides would say, the 12th century Jewish rabbi, physician, philosopher. In modern days, I'm not going to walk up to somebody, especially if I don't know you, and especially if you're from another tradition, or even when we're in the same, quote, tradition. You know, I don't know about, I know in Hinduism, like in Judaism, there's a big range. Some people are religious, some are not religious, some are religious except when they're not. Some believe in God, some don't. In Jewish tradition, we've got people who are, well, there's a range of practice. So I'm not going to necessarily offer a prayer, but I like the idea of blessing. But I may not even use that word blessing, because that already has certain connotation. And you were talking about the nuns, N-O-N-E-S. You know, I mean, listen, that's the way people are. I don't know who you are, but I do know who you are because we share a common humanity. And so I could say to you, before I go, what can I wish for you today? Now that's a blessing. What can I wish for you today? If in the course of the conversation, I found out we have a certain shared background, then I could say, and it might, the word blessing might be appropriate. I could say, may I offer you a blessing? Or maybe we have enough shared background and we could talk about a particular prayer or a chant or a practice we could do together. But there's something that will address what matters most, but in this way of blessing, in addition to, you know, guidance or teaching. In addition to that, and then we bring it to a close. And so just to back up, I've entered into this architecture in time by preparing my attention and intention. I cross a threshold to encounter you in your world. That means looking at you, listening, looking, you know, visibly at the situation, hearing you, sensing you, moving into the realm of words, listening to you as your words enter into me and touch me somewhere. I speak your words, so my voice enters into you. There's a joining that takes place. We enter into conversation. We have something is triggered within that it prompts me to care about, for, with you, to guide, to talk, to laugh, to cry, to be silent, to take your hand, spoken, unspoken, these kind of things. What can I wish for you? And then to take leave, to exit. But not to leave you alone. So I like to leave a little token. It might be a card, you know, call me, here's my card. I have cards that have my name on one side and then and a blessing on the other. You know, people hold on to these. It becomes a token. You need something material, because this conversation can be very, it's almost dreamlike when we enter into this kind of world, you know. It has a quality of time out of time once we're in it. Mm-hmm. So I found it useful to have tokens. A blessing card, for example, This is one that I have. It's called ahava. That's a Hebrew word. Those aren't Hebrew letters. They're English, of course, of love. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. I might say to somebody, and I have a pocket full of blessings.
And these have your name on the back?
Yeah, so on the back, there'll be my name.
Got it.
The name of my program. And then I might say to somebody, oh, I've got something for you. In fact, I might prescribe, you've been really anxious about all of this. One of the things in addition, what do I wish for you? And you say, oh, and you say this, that, and the other. And I say, well, in addition, I'd like to wish for you patience along your way. And then I might give you this card.
I love this.
So it becomes a little bit of like a prescription or a memento or a token, something like that. And I've got a stack of these that I've come up with.
Of course.
Now this is in Jewish tradition, but I've used this with people of all different backgrounds, and the Catholic people will have this on their bulletin board. I'll come by later. Ometz Lev. It literally means courage of the heart. Here's another one. Wisdom, trust. Okay. So in providing spiritual care, we can also come up with tokens. We can get inventive. We can be playful, whimsical. This isn't like all big, serious kind of stuff, although it can be too, of course. So these are just some initial thoughts of an architecture in time. I draw this idea from the Jewish tradition. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel talks about the Sabbath. The Sabbath day, it's a day of time out. He talks about it as an architecture in time. And so I liken this visit of sacred time, opening a space for a sacred space in time where I can engage with you and provide sacred care, spiritual care.
Wonderful. This was beautiful. Thank you very much. I'll see if we can steal the idea of those cards. Those cards are brilliant.
Great. Let me take this another step further. So this is the one-on-one encounter that I'm envisioning. Now it can take place. You talked about the many connecting with the many in a technological realm. Yes. So I want to imagine in that a little bit. It can be in person, of course. Let's say you and I, and maybe you call up, you go to the website and you get me. I happen to be on call that day and you and I talk face to face. But it could also be it's taking place in a, I don't know what to call it. Let's say a culture that we create, or a discourse, or a variety of ways. Maybe there's little YouTubes that people could go on. Maybe there's poetry. Maybe there's art. There's music that can be designed in a way that people can self-steer themselves toward. Mm. I'm thinking about people like, I've got two sons. One would want to, listen, I want to talk to you. The other was, no, I don't want to talk to somebody, but I'm glad to text. I'm glad to engage with something inanimate, but that really touches and speaks with me. So we can design for this kind of care. It's an experience. It's an experience that allows for connection. Connection has to do with love, and I believe that's like at the base of it all. A connection that has to do with time and hope and mood, and a connection that has to do with meaning, faith, living with the uncertainty that's the nature of living itself. So some initial thoughts. I'll call these thoughts for the design of spiritual care with you.
So the panel part is fine, but I'm still going to keep recording because I think this is a great conversation and food for thought. So not merely, so there's in-person conversations, there's on-video conversation of the type we're having now, maybe phone conversation, but you're saying not even that, maybe asynchronous, an architecture in time that is asynchronous is even more interesting. You have previously crafted gifts for people that when they run into those gifts, 20 years or 2,000 years later, they still speak to them in the same manner, those gifts.
Exactly. I think what's happening, what we're designing for is an encounter, an experiential encounter that this being self who I am, with the concerns and the anguish and the suffering and the pain and the hopes, and also the joys, the gratitude. You know, unexpressed gratitude is a source of suffering.
Interesting.
Let me say that again and tell a little story, because I was struck by that one day. I was called to the bedside at the hospital. Chaplain, come quick, your patient is in excruciating pain and anguish. She just, this is the one who just had her kidney transplant. And so I ran up to the room and I said, oh my God, what happened? Did the transplant go bad? Is it being rejected? And I went in expecting to see her crying or sobbing or something, but she was indeed in anguish. But it was because she was so overjoyed. And she couldn't express it. It physically was painful for her.
Oh, the heart was swelling so much with joy, it hurt.
It physically hurt, and you could see it in her face, her body. It physically hurt. It couldn't come out. It was stuck. It couldn't come out. And so I sat down and she said, I've been waiting for this moment. And part of this I recognize also is physiological. Now her body is able to process in ways that it could not before. Mm-hmm. It was overwhelming her nervous system, but also overwhelming her psychic, social, and spiritual system. And she said, I've been waiting for this moment. I've been struggling. I thought I was going to die. And she went on to tell me how much she has to live for, and her children, and her hopes and her dreams that she had given up. And now they're suddenly rekindled, and they could come to be. And she can't even put it into words. It's such a gratitude, such an overjoy that's brimming, but it's breaking through and it hurts. And what do I do with this? She wants to know. How do I give thanks? How do I give thanks to the donor? How do I give thanks to the doctor? She wants to give thanks to the whole system. You know, as we start to unpack this, I said, well, let's just take this apart. We don't have to give thanks right away and all at once. And so over about an hour, we talked, and she just came to a sense of the gratitude that became a serenity and a peacefulness. Tears flowed. We brought her back to it was a healing state. She could now move forward. So I came to appreciate that unexpressed gratitude or other unexpressed positive emotions can also be a source of anguish.
Interesting. So
have you thought of that before? Maybe you've come across that too, but I had not.
Did you and I talk? So when I present HCI and what we do, our vision of the society, you may have heard this talk. I talk about how, if we were transported to Mars, we would not survive as a species because, except, if we were in an enclosure, because the temperature there is low and lower. The ranges every day are -20 Celsius to -80 every day. So it's a very harsh and unlivable environment because of a lack of atmosphere. Whereas on Earth, it's a comfortable range of being
Yeah.
which we live in. And to me, that's the reason I'm passionate about HCI is what is a society? A society functions to be the air conditioning for the spiritual self, which is to say, to insulate our spiritual selves from the excesses of the highs and the lows and keep us in a narrow and comfortable range. And so the part of, if I win $1 billion lottery and I have no one to explain it to, because of course you sent me to Mars and I'm inside an enclosure, I will not be able to express that joy to anyone. And that itself will be a problem because that's what's
Yeah.
right? Because that joy is useless if I can't share it, if I'm not able to scream at people and be heard by people.
Exactly.
And that's the function of society. And my point is that I feel the society, the atmospheric layer of our society is withering away the connection we have to each other, which you begin with. You begin your architecture with the connection. That connection is breaking apart.
Yes.
And we are disconnecting not only from each other, but also disconnecting from ourselves. We don't know how we feel unless we see it on Instagram or on the internet. And
you know what? This is so interesting. Seeing on the Instagram or seeing out there, it's like we have our cell phone, but we need to take a selfie.
Yeah, to see ourselves.
We need to look inward, and I'm thinking about gratitude. The practice of gratitude is a way of creating connection.
Yeah, that reflexiveness.
And also, how about this gratitude? How gratitude gives rise to service.
Yes.
Here's how I'm seeing it. I'm interested to see what you think. In a moment when I'm suddenly feeling grateful for something, particularly, let's take it in a more intense case where I'm feeling what I'll call a grace. Something happens to me that comes in unexpected, like a gift. Maybe it's a quality of attention that you bring to me. Maybe it's a quality of listening that you bring, or the way you just happen to show up in a moment of my dejectedness or breakdown or anguish. A quality of caring or compassion or presence. And it comes in like a surprise. And I'm filled with something that I don't expect. It's a feeling of gratitude. But it's also a grace. I didn't expect this. And who am I to deserve such a thing? Mm-hmm. And it extends not only to you, but like, where does this come from in the first place? And I'm so grateful. I want to give thanks. Maybe it's a thanks to life itself. And I realize in that moment, I am just so friggin' glad to be alive. How do I give thanks to life? How do I give thanks to the source of wherever life comes? That is so big, I can't wrap my arms around it. How do you give a hug to something you can't wrap your arms around? And so but yet I'm compelled to say thank you. So how do I say thank you? What I can do is turn around and do something for an aspect of life or another person who also belongs to this greaterness. That is something I could do and give it forward. And that's a way of saying thank you back. And that, for me, I'm beginning to appreciate how that is a spark, a source of service. Yes. Born of gratitude and the impulse to give thanks and close the loop. Yeah. What do you think?
100%. When we teach Karma Yoga at HCI, this is the spirit, which is the devotional surrender to God, whatever your name and form of divinity, it does not matter. Yeah. But that devotional surrender leads to a state where you now say, I am a part of you, this greater whole.
Yeah.
Now, how may I act in service?
Yeah.
And may all my actions be in your service. In
Yeah.
fact, may this being be an instrument of your service. And
where does that impulse come from? That's what I'm going to. I'm with you on that. The may I, but what's the impulse of that in our human spirit?
I think we are, as a social species, we are built for this empathy. We are built for this sense of connectedness, and it's the absence of this connectedness that drives us mad.
Yeah.
This is our natural state.
Yeah.
We're born with two legs, and so we walk. But if we don't learn to walk, then it's an unnatural state. It's the same with this sense of service. We are born as an altruistic species that connects and bonds and cares for each other. And to not be able to do that is to be out of balance with our own inner nature. Yeah. And I think that's...
So it arises from within our very nature itself.
It is our nature. We don't have to be taught it. We do have to be taught how to express it. But it is in our nature itself.
And we have to be taught to get out of the way and allow it to recognize and allow for it to be there.
Yes.
Very nice.
Thank you, Bruce G. And now I'd like to invite Sifu and Mulares Ji to talk to us about the shifting religion to spirituality dynamics.
So I head up an organization called Spiritual Directors International, which is about 6,000, a little over 6,000, 6,500 spiritual companions and directors across the planet, and a multi-faith, multi-spiritual organization really dedicated to helping others gain their own sense of the communion with the divine, with the spirit, with the universe, with God, with Brahman, with Allah, with Tao, however they might define it. And so our goals are very much in line with those of the Hindu Community Institute, and with really kind of mapping a road for people to have better and easier, at the same time, more profound and deeper access to the mystical wellspring.
Thank you very much, and welcome again.
Thank you.
I'll move to the next question. Coming next to you, Sifu, I'd like to ask you, because at SDI you see a lot of interfaith, multi-faith spiritual directors, how are you seeing the shifting religion to spirituality dynamics? How is that changing the field of spiritual direction? How does it improve it? What challenges are you seeing and sensing?
Yeah. So I think the main thing that we are seeing is a shift towards essence. And when I say a shift towards essence, it's really a profound desire for authenticity. And a lot of the cohort that you were describing, the spiritual but not religious or spiritual independence, are really folks who are looking for this authenticity in many different places, with some suspicion against established religious institutions. And that's, a long conversation that we can have some other day. It's not particularly germane to our conversation today, other than to say that really what drives them is they're very spiritually hungry, and they're really desiring authenticity, free from hierarchies, power structures, power dynamics, complicated institutional norms that they see, with some justification, in my opinion, as taking people further away from a spiritual connection rather than closer to it. So I think that's part of what's driving is this desire for spiritual authenticity. I'd say that the challenge that we face is to convince people not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. right? That all of our traditions, and we'll talk about the Hindu tradition in particular, or the Buddhist tradition that I am a part of, where I would say I'm spiritual and religious, not spiritual and not religious, because I believe that spirituality is at the essence of our religious traditions, and that in spite of all of the distortions that many institutions that house them can manifest, there is still that authenticity within our systems. So I'd say two ways to the divine, two ways to spirit, to all that which has 1,000 names and is nameless at the same time, is there needs to be a method, right? There needs to be some way to engage deeply. And that's important because we need to be able to hold on to handrails as we navigate into the beyond, if you will. And I'm mixing language here, but we need a lot of structure to attain the lack of structure. Or to attain freedom, I should say, right? The ultimate goal is freedom and liberation. And yet the paradox is you need a lot of discipline and a lot of focus and a lot of study and perseverance to be able to enter. That's for most people, at least. There's some exceptions, but for most people, it requires a lot of, developing good habits, developing good modalities, strengthening ourselves on the road so that we could eventually become unbound, if you will, and free to benefit others. Because once we attain our own realization and communion with the infinite, then it feeds back to us with instructions, if you will, that says, this is not just for you. There is no, this is for everyone. And it's now your job to try to benefit as many other people as you can. So I think that's the main challenge that I see is to have people recognize that there is great depth, insight, and beauty in existing religious traditions, and to guide them faithfully and authentically to the heart of those traditions.
It's great. Now, you talked about the challenge of people being suspicious with reason or otherwise of organized religion, and as people are becoming, but the spiritual hunger is very much there. You're saying,
yeah.
How are they coming to spiritual direction? How is that changing the field of spiritual direction?
Yeah, so I think what is changing is that that spiritual companions or counselors or directors, or however you want to define yourself or other people may define us, really have to be far more versatile than they have been historically, right? It's not enough to say this is what the tradition says, right? You have to inform it with the reality of the moment that we're living through, a reality that encompasses all sorts of challenges that, the pandemics of various kinds, of racism, of nationalism, of health emergencies, of matters that really kind of bring matters of life and death to the forefront of what we need to deal. So I think spiritual counselors need more tools than ever. And it's really a combination of these tools. And we were talking a little bit earlier about spirituality in a secular setting. Well, those two are not necessarily opposed. I think the job of a good spiritual counselor or companion is to integrate so that people who come to us can see that spirituality is directly relevant to every decision that they make in their lives, to every action that they undertake, to everything that they see and witness has a spiritual dimension if they just look from a slightly different perspective. I think most of us are just rushing by things, right? Running so fast and so determined that we miss everything that's there, that's already telling us how we need to behave, how we need to act in the world from a spiritual perspective. So I think that's the main challenge that spiritual companions and spiritual guides, counselors have, is they need more tools. We need more tools in our arsenal to be able to respond to the very complicated dynamics that are in front of us today.
Interesting. Now I'm going to ask you to wear your technology hat as well, in addition. You talked about having more tools in the arsenal. You talked also about being more versatile in your approach, because that's what the requirement is. How do you think of the way, how can we increase global knowledge sharing for the society? How can we make sure that spiritual direction is seamless and boundaryless?
Yeah, it used to be that the entry points for an immersive spirituality were a pretty tall order, right? You would have to be, travel to an ashram. You would have to be admitted. You would have to kind of soak it in and participate in the community, usually over a period of many years, or now decades, or a lifetime, in order to really get a sense of what was being offered, which wouldn't be revealed to you, not because it was necessarily being hidden, but that would unfurl slowly as part of the traditional training mechanism. These days, technology helps us bridge a lot of those gaps, right? In some ways, it helps us speed up so that we can slow down. And that might sound counterintuitive, but it's really what we're trying to do is speed up so that we can slow down. And slow down means the life of contemplation, the life of immersion, the life of the spirit, which requires careful, meditative, prayerful discernment. But we can skip over a lot of the initial kind of ritualistic institutional steps, if you will, and get to the heart of the matter, which is, why are we here? What is it that we're being called to do? And how is the life of the spirit going to inform me as a human, as an individual, in terms of how I lead my life, and more importantly, in terms of how I decide to be in communion with others and ideally help others to reach their own sense of growing spirituality, evolving spirituality. So I think the fact that we have digital ways to engage means that we can cut in line, if you will, or be able to get to that authentic immersion much more quickly. And then, of course, at that point, then we have to slow down. But at least we can skip all of and that appeals to a lot of the spiritual but not religious cohort, that they're looking for that authenticity. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, they're exploring a lot of different things. So technology has an important role by opening up, you don't have to get on an airplane, travel thousands of miles, spend, a lot of money in hotels and all sorts of complicated logistics to at least get a sense of, is this the right path for me? And, to at least get a little water sprinkled on the seed of our growing spirituality.
Some of my favorite Zen stories involve Zen monks who have to wait outside the monastery because the abbot wouldn't let them in until they're ready. So,
yes, that's right. That's right.
Now I'm disturbed to hear that you can cut the line.
Yes. No, I mean, I think everyone is at a different level, right? And all of us get different things at different stages in our life. And Hinduism speaks about that very powerfully across many of its expressions, that there's a right time in life for various things. But at least at whatever stage you're at, you should be able to get what you're looking for, and not in the sense of some kind of material, you can't possess it, but at least be exposed to the kind of information that is going to feed your soul, that is going to feed your spiritual growth. And that becomes much more possible. And this is something that I've witnessed in our own organization with lowered barriers. We can have digital conferences now, and they're much more successful than any in-person conferences because they're easier for people to attend. Yeah. And you can there is no substitute for face-to-face, but what we're doing right now comes pretty close. And so I think technology has a growing role, and probably we'll see in the next 20, 25 years and beyond, a really vital role in helping to propel spiritual growth and development for all of us.
Thank you, Sifu. Wow, this has been a tremendous learning experience. I have truly enjoyed this conversation and have taken so many notes. It's very clear that the spiritual care that we need is possible if we all work together. Spiritual care of the future will include the best of thought and insight that we have from traditional religion, but will incorporate within it the use of technology to reach more people, the use of continued extension of compassionate presence into every conversation, a interfaith and interreligious dialogue that allows us to learn from each other and create something truly unique and wonderful. A system of self-organization is important, and it seems obviously within reach. This conversation has just begun. Today's conversation lays the groundwork, we hope, for many such conversations and action into the future. We're looking forward to hearing from you. So thank you very much for joining this panel. And if you'd like to participate, if you'd like to engage, you have feedback, please send us an email. I'm going to moderate on behalf of this panel, so send an email at the email address you're seeing here. And tell us how you feel, tell us your ideas, and if you want to partner, tell us that as well. We look forward to hearing from you and to truly bringing out a new kind of spiritual care for the future. Thank you very much to everyone on the panel. Thank you very much, and namaskar.